and welcome. You coming down? She's debating. Oh, here she comes. There we go. Oh. There's my cat. She's feeling particularly needy today, so she's been all over me, which is okay. Yeah. Oh. Anyway, for today's video, I thought we would discuss like the different kinds of rats and how you can tell what kind you have. Just because this is a question that comes up a lot in groups. So yeah, I just thought I would do a quick video for it since I'm currently in intros. And yeah, you can't see any of them, but there's a lot of activity behind me. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. So first, how can you tell if you have a male rat or a female rat? This is something you'll see joked about a lot by veteran rat owners just because, well, it's pretty obvious when you have an adult male rat. But if you don't know, you don't know. And if you're a first-time rat owner and you have young rats and you aren't sure, if no one tells you how to tell the difference, then you don't know, and that's fine. So yeah, if you have adult rats, you'll know if you have a boy because they will have extremely obvious balls. Like very extremely obvious. Now, neutered males obviously don't have that, but the chances of you getting a neutered male and not being told are very, very slim. And if you get a neutered male when you have females, it doesn't actually matter. So like, even if you think you have a female and it turns out to be a neutered male, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the chances of you getting a neutered male without knowing are basically zilch. But yeah, they have very, very obvious testicles. Now that is the most common way of telling them apart because the male rats typically drop their balls around like 4 or 5 weeks. It's typically around 4-ish weeks, 4.5 weeks. It happens very quickly, like basically overnight. All of a sudden they have testicles. So chances are you're not going to get a rat so young that you can't tell just visually by like glancing at them that they are a male. But there are other couple ways of telling males from females apart. So one of the common things you'll see is that if they have nipples, they are female, and if they don't, they are male. And that is true. Male rats do not have nipples. However, this is not the best way to tell the difference between males and females, just because sometimes you can't actually see a female's nipples because of her coloring or her coat type. So it's not always the most obvious thing, and you don't want to go based just on that because you can easily mistake a female for a male and then end up with an instant if you just go based on that. And for another reason, rats can be intersex. It's something that comes up honestly more often than you would think. I've seen several, and so even though male rats do not have nipples, an intersex rat can have nipples but also male genitalia. So yeah, the nipples are not the best way to tell the difference. So the most common way that you'll see people telling the difference will be through the genitalia itself. So with female rats, they have the urethra, and then right beneath that there is the vulva. So if you see the urethra and then a hole underneath that, that is a female rat. And then the distance between the urethra and the anus is a lot shorter than with male rats. So with male rats, you'll see the urethra and then no hole beneath that, and then a longer stretch between that and the anus. And that is how most breeders tell babies apart before the males have dropped their testicles. And it's actually not that hard. My friend Kendra had her accidental litter. That's where humdrum's for those of you who've been here a while and are just watching this to watch it. Thank you, by the way. But yeah, she had an accidental litter, and there were 12 babies, 11 of which made it to adulthood, and we accurately sexed all the babies at like a week old. We didn't really mess with them too much before that, but like we accurately sexed all of them our first go. So it's not that hard to tell the difference once you get the hang of what. And also the thing with male rats, baby male rats, is around like the 2.5 week mark. Once you know their eyes are open and they're moving around a little bit. How do I put this? Hold on. How do I put this delicately? Their little peepee sticks out. Like a lot. I've seen it in like so many pictures where people are just like, are they male or female? And it's just like, poof. So yeah, it's not that hard to tell the difference once you kind of know what you're looking for. Now, if you do get rats that are quite young from a breeder and you're wondering if they are different genders, there's no harm in confirming with someone who's more experienced, definitely. And the best option is if they are separate or different genders, to separate them immediately. Even if you do end up with a male and female rat, that is not a guarantee that the female rat will be pregnant, because when female rats are very young, before they've had their first heat cycle, their vulva isn't open. So basically what that means is they'll have their urethra and the distance between their urethra and the anus, but there won't be another hole underneath that. Once they have their first heat cycle, that's when that will open up. So again, the most accurate way to tell the difference, even with young rats, is typically whether or not they have balls. Most female rats have their first heat cycle between 5 and 7 weeks old. Some, usually in my experience, around the 6-week mark is more accurate, but it can happen as young as 5 weeks. So it is best to just make sure that everyone's the same gender and separate at 5 weeks old, just in case. Now, another thing I commonly get asked is if someone has a dwarf rat or a standard size rat. So the thing with this is the chances of you getting a dwarf and not knowing it are very, very, very slim. They can crop up as a surprise in a litter, but the breeder in all likelihood will know before they adopt out that that is a dwarf. It's way more common for a breeder to sell you a dwarf and it turns out to be standard size, to sell you a standard size and it turns out to be a dwarf. So there are a few differences other than size, but size can be a factor. Typically when people say that they think they have a dwarf, what they really have is just a small standard size rat. And there are a few ways to tell the difference other than size, because I've mentioned that the sizes vary greatly both in dwarfs and in standards. And so it's not uncommon to get a standard size female that is around 250 grams and you can have a dwarf that's 200 grams. They look very similar. So like, it's not always so cut and dry, but there are a few other physical differences between dwarf rats and standard size rats. So starting off, the eyes. Typically a dwarf rat will have quite large eyes in comparison to the rest of their face. Now you can get standard sizes that have this. I find that my silvermanes oftentimes have really bulgy eyes. I don't know why. I don't know if that's a silvermane trait or if it's just like what these breeders are going for, but like my silvermanes tend to have really big eyes, but not dwarf big. My dwarf rats have very large eyes. Another factor is the size of their feet in comparison to their body. Their feet tend to be just a wee bit smaller than the standard size feet. Again, it can vary because like Blooper, for example, who's up there in intros, her feet are huge. They are so big compared to her body. And then most of my other standards, their feet are not that noticeably large. But the dwarfs have really teeny tiny feet. And the other physical feature that you will notice with dwarfs is their tail. Not all dwarfs, but a lot of dwarfs have these really short, thin tails. I call them noodle tails, in comparison to a standard size rat who typically have very large, bulky tails, very round tails. Now again, the chances that you're going to get a dwarf and not know it are very, very slim. But I have seen them cropping up in rescues, and there's a chance that if a rescue just has a bunch of baby rats and they're adopting them out, they're not going to notice immediately. But again, very, very slim. Your chances are you just have a small standard sized rat. Now let's talk about Rex versus double Rex versus true hairless. I see a lot of people not quite knowing that there is a difference between true hairless and double Rex. So first of all, Rex is a gene that causes their rat's fur to be curly. So I currently have, I think, 4 Rexes, because I'm pretty sure Dynamo and Jojo are just poor Rexes. But their fur gets curly. It's super cute. I love it. And then if you get 2 copies of that gene in a rat, you get a double Rex. And double Rexes can vary quite a bit. Some double Rexes just have a little bit of fur on their face. Some have a little bit of fur all over their body, and some have quite a bit of fur. My 2 double Rexes were actually pretty furry for double Rexes. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the ideal for a double Rex. The more they look like a hairless, the less of a point I see in doubling the gene. And then the thing with the difference between a double Rex and a true hairless is that they do have fur. A true hairless is not going to have any fur. They're going to be completely hairless, completely nude, if you will. So if you get a baby rat and it's furry and then it suddenly loses its fur, in all likelihood that is a double Rex, not a true hairless. And the thing with most rescue rats is I find that they are double Rex, not true hairless. Let's talk about some coat modifiers, basically, because a lot of these can just be sneaky little genetics that pop up in rats from anywhere. So like I mentioned Rex. Rex is a curly type of coat. A Rexoid coat is what they call it. And in standard sizes, it's going to be very curly. And dwarf, I find that it looks very similar to standard size. But there's velveteen, which is also a curly coat type. Now the difference between these two is velveteen is typically way softer than Rex. Rex tends to be a quite rough fur texture. And then velveteen tends to be a lot softer. But in standard size rats, they don't have much of a curl. However, in dwarfs, they have quite a bit of curl. So like Aggie, for example, she's my best velveteen. I'll pop up a picture of her here. But yeah, that is not going to be typical in a standard sized. Because typically a standard sized velveteen is just going to look like a little poof ball. Harleys are pretty easy to spot because they have such a long coat. But a lot of times they end up losing a lot of their fur. So a lot of Harleys can look like, not double Rex, because I don't know, they just look different. They look ill, honestly. But a lot of Harleys also have a shine to their coat, which makes them look greasy to me. So that's a good sign that it's a Harley. Silvermanes are probably the sneakiest coat I've noticed, because I've gotten a lot of accidental Silvermanes. And the thing with that, it's pretty easy to spot if you know what you're looking for, because even on super pale rats, you can see the Silvermane in sunlight. So Silvermane is a type of coat where the tip of each hair is transparent, and it creates this interesting look. I'll pop up some pictures of my Silvermanes. And the thing with Silvermane is it does look better on darker coats, but I do have a Siamese Silvermane and 2 fawn Silvermanes. And I can still tell that they're Silvermane. So with the fawn, it's like the oranginess to their coat is reduced. The red part is kind of reduced and they look more yellow. And then with Gummy, who is my Siamese Silvermane, she very much looks Siamese, but her coat is a lot softer. Silvermane's called silken in the UK for a reason. Their coats tend to be very soft. Another thing is Silvermane fur tends to be just the teeniest bit longer. It's like denser too. It's like it takes longer to like get to the skin while brushing them back, checking their skin and stuff. And their fur doesn't always lay completely flat. So sometimes you'll be watching them and it'll look like they have like lines in their fur because it's standing slightly up, and it's not puffiness. They're not like, it's not true proliferation. It's just that their fur doesn't lay completely flat all the time. And that is one of the biggest like indicators for Silvermane I've noticed, for me anyway, is like their fur just doesn't lay flat even though it's a smooth coat. Let's talk eyes. Now, a lot of people tend to assume that if you have a red-eyed rat that they're an albino, but they aren't necessarily. So you can have a fawn that has red eyes, a Siamese, a Himalayan, a Tonkinese, a Burmese, pretty much any of the sea locust genes. They can have red eyes, and an albino is also sea locust. So like all those varieties can have red eyes. They're only albino if they're completely white. I don't have a Tonk or a Burm to show you, but both of those are brown rats that can have red eyes, and they have nose points as well. Well, I've had a Tonkinese. She just had black eyes. Also red-eyed martins, which is what lamb is, and what bug and honey were as well, and those are gray rats with red eyes. And the only one that's albino out of all these is the white rat with red eyes. My cat's biting me. And last, finally, do you have a Dumbo or a top ear? And this is super easy. If you have a top ear, their ears are, as it suggests, on top of their head. If you have a Dumbo, their ears are slightly further back. It is not a different kind of rat. It is just the ear position. A lot of people think they're different kinds of rats because the pet stores like PetSmart sell them separately from top ears because they can mark them up. Because Dumbos are, generally speaking, more desirable than top ears. I don't personally agree with that. I love both. But that is how the pet stores work. They also sell hairless separately, which is why, if you ever wondered why when you call to make a vet appointment, they ask you if you have a fancy rat, a Dumbo rat, or a hairless rat, it's because that's how pet stores sell them. So a lot of people, pet stores included, when they take their rats to the vet and they ask what kind of rat is it, that's what they say. I was like, well, I have a hairless rat or I have a fancy rat. And that's why that's a thing. So yeah. Well, I hope this video was helpful to those of you who are watching it for that, or fun for those of you who are just watching it to watch it. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Yes.